Hey guys, it's DAZZ Zach, back with another review and my old intro angle because I didn't like the new one. Today we're taking a look at the VGN F2. It's a slightly larger reimagining of a shape that I've used in the past and thoroughly enjoyed. Coming from VGN, we can make the assumption this is probably very well made, and I'll tell you right now, it is a mouse that I am in some capacity considering maining. But why is that, and how well does this emulate that G-Wolves HTX shape? Let's find out. So here we have it, the VGN F2. This is the Pro version, not the Ultra, so unfortunately I do not have the Omron opticals. That is because, like almost all of these budget mice, I end up buying them with my own money, and the version with the Omron opticals just costs more and is not some money I wanted to spend. I will say before you ask, yes, the coloration of this mouse does not show up well in this camera for some reason, no matter how I change the colors of my background light, for example. You still can't quite get it. This is the closest I think I can get it. It's a little bit more green versus the highlighter green you see here on the screen, but this is the best representation that I could give. It's basically a lime green color. This mouse is sort of a shape after my own heart. As you can see, the low click height here, the low, slightly mid, slightly back hump profile. This is like a larger G-Wolves HTX. The problem I had with that mouse, even though I loved it, was just too small and too low profile. This is a larger version and it fits my hand like an absolute glove. I've been making this for over a week now. After doing some on and off testing, I decided to just stick with it as a main, and it's been really enjoyable. I've been performing well. VGN has been absolutely slaying it lately. As you can see, I have the Pro Max version and not the Ultra Plus. Main differences here is the Compex MCU and the 3395, as well as 4 grams higher weight due to the larger battery in the Pro Max. And then it has Huano 100 million clicks, which is the transparent green shell white dot, a switch that I do enjoy, versus the Omron optical, which is my favorite switch. And those are about the only differences. Transparently, this is probably the best version of the mouse here, the Ultra Plus. I do know a couple people who have gotten that. I'm not as concerned about this. It more comes down to the Omron opticals, which you can solder them in if you would like to. I know for a fact that VGN's Omron optical implementation is very good, and I am looking forward to trying it soon. Going back to those green shell white dots, these are distinctly medium in actuation force. They are definitely not on the lighter side. They're not super heavy, but not super light. There is a solid amount of tactility in these switches, and they do become heavier as you come to the top of the button. There is some side-to-side play here, nothing egregious. Not much pre or post travel. Overall, these clicks are very satisfying. I don't really have any complaints. You can spam them plenty, not quite as much as an Omron optical, but it's hard to spam a switch as much as an Omron optical, which is one of the reasons that I do love them. I am a fan of these clicks. If you're someone who likes tactile mechanical clicks that really aren't too light, these are probably the clicks for you. Coming to the scroll wheel, it is not rubber. This is actually like a rough, hard texture. It's like similar to a Final Mouse scroll wheel, but it's not the same material. It's very like rough and knurled on the skin if you go across it like this, but in use, it almost feels rubberized, which is pretty interesting. The scroll itself has like light to medium steps, but they're very defined. The click is not a full mechanical switch, but it is very, very spammable, which is refreshing coming off of the heavier scroll wheel that I had on the Incot 029. Coming to the side buttons here, they're not a problem really at all, but they're a slightly weaker point of the mouse for me. As you can see, they're placed very far forward here on the mouse, which with my grip does make reaching the front one a little more challenging, so do take note of that. I think for most people that's probably a preferable placement, but for me not so much. They are bare plastic, not coated, and also not glossy, so not the best there. That doesn't really matter in game, but if I'm being super nitpicky because I review so many mice, I do prefer either a coated or glossy side button. You can sink these into the shell a little bit so that they become completely flush with the shell. It's not like a cheap way, there's no give when that happens, but that is there. As far as the actual clicks themselves, I would describe them almost in the same way as I did the main switches. They're pretty tactile. You can still spam them pretty well with decent rebound, but they are not the latest click. I will say though, they are very well in place and there is almost no side-to-side play on these. So overall, they're well implemented side buttons, not super light, not super heavy, and placed very far forward. The coating on this mouse is quite good. I really like it. Honestly, one of the draws for me to keep coming back to this mouse, I apologize, as the coloration just keeps going in and out, left and right. I can't really fix that. One of the main draws though is this coating. It's very smooth, but becomes very grippy when your hand warms up. This isn't a mouse that like sticks in my hand without grip tape due to the lower profile, so I do still need that piece of grip tape here in the back when I'm using it. But overall, the coating is just very satisfying to me in hand. Again, not overly rubberized, a little bit more matte, very smooth and satisfying to the touch. A coating I really like. Overall, like if you're going for all hand types, it's probably like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. But for me personally, it's more of a 9 out of 10 and a huge plus of the mouse. Coming to the bottom of the mouse, the skate design here is okay. We do have this micro 8K dongle, which I can report performs fine for the higher pulling rates, but I do wish it was larger and it didn't cause this stupid dongle storage to exist on the bottom of the mouse, something that I am never a fan of because it cuts out the possibility for the larger pad skate here. But overall, the skate design on this, not too bad. It is very thick. They're both thick enough to place any size dot skate you would want in there. Maybe not donuts, but if we can get dots, we'll come away happy. The glide on these is fine. Again, this is a speed pad, the infinite speed. but I can glide all the way across the pad without too much trouble. Interestingly enough to me, these did feel very similar to the VGN Y2 skates, but in practice, they felt less muddy, a little quicker, totally usable to me. They're not the fastest stock skates, they're not the slowest stock skates, they're just fine. They're also not the thickest, not the most rounded. I don't have any real complaints about them. As you can see the rounding there, but they're not my favorite skates. They do get a strong pass for me. And then as you can see here, the sensor a little bit forward of center, which I love to see. Build integrity wise, there's a slight bit of side flex if you press here, but nothing really to write home about. No other integrity issues that I found on any other part of the mouse. Even a lack of bottom flex here is nice to see. This Pro Max version does weigh in the mid 50 grams, so I would expect it to have really good build quality. This is a mouse that I enjoy enough that I may consider battery mounting it and throwing iron obstacles in long term, which would easily get this into probably the mid 40s if you went to like a 250 milliamp hour battery. But at default, the weight didn't feel too heavy for me. I feel like I've become immune to weights that are 65 grams or less. They just all feel, as long as the mouse is implemented well and it's well balanced, which this one is, they all just feel fine to me. And as this is a little bit larger of a mouse size, the 55 grams did not bother me at all. So my overall impressions of the implementation of this mouse are very, very positive. Anything that I complained about was a minor nitpick. Sure, the skates could be slightly thicker, slightly larger, slightly faster, but honestly, these perform completely fine for me. And I guess personally, the side buttons could be a little bit further back, but this is probably an average position that a majority of grips will like. So honestly, overall, implementation on this mouse is nearly flawless, an absolute banger from VGN. Getting a quick Eloshapes comparison because I do not have an HTX on hand. This HTX Ultra that released recently is only slightly smaller than the VGN F2 we have here. Obviously, the Ultra Plus is closer to 50 grams, but there's still almost an 18 to 20 gram difference. The HTX Ultra from G-Wolves is comically light. Obviously, nowhere near solid shell though, but as you can see here, the original HTX Ace itself was even sub 40 grams. So you are adding some weight here with a little bit of size. Again, the dimensions here across the board, just a little bit 1 to 2 millimeters larger. And even this new HTX Ultra is a little bit larger than the old Ace. It just results in a slightly larger mouse that is slightly taller across the board. I think VGN here did a very good job, as you can see, universally scaling the mouse, so it still really captures the essence of the HTX shape. I do, however, still want to do a shape comparison for you guys. So I'm gonna call my old buddy the Lamzu Maya X, the Fanatic Edition, which still, in my opinion, has the best clicks known to man. The armor and obstacles in this mouse are otherworldly, but these mice actually profile more closely than you might think. They're actually very similar in overall size. Actually, the hump profiles too, more similar than you may have thought. The main difference here, shockingly, is really just that the Maya X is taller in the front and it's a little bit longer of a mouse as far as the hump and side profile go. A distinctive feature of the F2 would be the low click height, but honestly, the Maya X also not much taller in click height either. As is apparent here though, the Maya X is a wider mouse in the front, but the main differences you'll see in shape are when you come to the bottom, which reveals some things about the F2. The F2 has a very distinctive back flare here that becomes much more narrow in the center part of the mouse. Very comfortable, I guess, like ergonomic shape for an ambi mouse. The way it tapers fits my thumb really comfortably right here where it sits. And then the sides of the Maya are just generally flatter, more GPS-esque, not nearly as potato shaped boring as the GPX, but pretty darn flat as you come to the front of the mouse, where there is a bit more like character sort of taper back out here on the F2. And it's really that narrow waist here that is the largest differentiator. In hand, the Maya X is much more filling, and that's mainly due to its overall wider profile and also the higher height throughout the top mid part of the mouse. On the F2 here, you can really feel these comfort grooves. You can see they're pretty darn defined here, and they play very nicely with the low click height. Specifically how I got the mouse far forward here, it feels very, very good in hand, but I'm in no way bothered by that low click height. I will say, due to the slightly overall lower profile of the F2, I feel a little bit less stable in tracking scenarios, but a little bit more maneuverable when it comes to micro adjustments. Whereas on the Maya X here, I do just feel sort of locked in. It fills my hand more, but it does provide more stability. I would say right now I am really enjoying the F2, but the Maya X does remain one of my favorite shapes. Start off the performance talk with a quick mouse tester graph here of the update interval time. This is like the polling rate consistency basically. And this was on 2K, which is what I did a majority of my testing on. And the performance here was quite good. You'd expect an update every half second, which is what the majority of these polls congregate around. A few outliers here, which typically happens in a test. Nothing too egregious. So overall, solid performance here. Nothing to be concerned about in any of the mouse tester graphs that I saw, which is reassuring with that micro dongle. As far as my overall experience with the performance and the shape, I would say it was very positive. I never ran into any hiccups in tracking, no skipping, no real problems, which is not a surprise with today's 3395 implementations and VGN's good track record. As far as how the shape works for me, again, this solves the problem that I had with the HTX Ace that I used to have, that it was just too small. Even though this is a low profile mouse, because it's a little bit longer, I am able to get some stability and some mid upper palm contact from this part of the mouse, which actually allowed me to perform really well in smooth tracking scenarios. But at 122 millimeters, this mouse is still on the upper side of a medium-sized mouse, which allowed me some nice maneuverability in hand here, but was also a large enough mouse to lock in when I needed to be very steady in my aim. Overall, the clicks, even though they were or medium actuation were not too heavy for me to be very performant as well in static clicking scenarios, and I did perform well in some very limited Fortnite play. I do think this is a mouse a lot of people would enjoy, and it's a way to sort of get exposure to that HTX shape without breaking the bank on G-Wolves' more expensive, like recent HTX Ultra. You could also go for the James Donkey RS-R5, but I think this is just overall a better mouse in a lot of ways. Every bit of this mouse is implemented just a little bit better than that mouse. I did really enjoy the clicks and the coding on that mouse, but I think this is just a better total package. With coupons on AliExpress, this ran me $47, and I believe cashback was 15% that day, so I got it for just about 40 bucks. If you're going through VGN's site though, however, this is a $60 mouse. The Pro Max and the Ultra Plus does come in at 80 bucks, which begs the question, is this on the same level as a Scyrox? Because those mice, the V6 and the V8, are sort of the $70 standard. And my answer to that is unequivocally yes. This is on the same tier as far as performance, as far as feel in hand, as far as the overall implementation as those mice. So if you don't want the Scyrox V6's very tall hump, if you don't want the Scyrox V8's very large back hump that's going to be bulbous and lock you in, you want more of this low profile HTX S shape, I do endorse this at a $60 or $80 price tag, depending on which version you're going for. I think it's still a solid buy, not the best value in the market, but you're getting a great mouse and by no means at a bad price. The software is a snooze fest, but there will be some people who've never seen it before or seen any of my videos, so I will cover it quickly. You can change your DPI settings here. Pulling rate wise, even this Pro Max version with the micro dongle does go up to 8K. I usually test on 2. This does have an esports mode. It does not, however, have the 20K mode yet. I wouldn't worry about using the 20K mode if I were you. This is plenty performant. I also rock the long distance mode, and then it has standard stuff. You can set your bounce to 0, change your sleep settings and your LOD. We do have the mouse coming in completely stock at 55.6 grams. Definitely not a light mouse, but also not egregiously heavy. As far as the measurements go, smallest taper point on this mouse does occur a little bit forward of the center, and I get that at roughly 56.3 millimeters. The max back flare here clocks in at about 65 millimeters, and I get the hump height here just over 38 millimeters. I will say I have had about ones of people ever message me about the measurements to get some comparisons to mice I hadn't measured, and it's a part of the video I enjoy, so I'm going to keep doing it. So that about sums it up for my thoughts on the VGN F2, this being the Pro Max. Not shockingly, very impressed by this mouse. It's implemented well across the board, and even the mechanical non-on-run optical clicks ended up being very satisfying for me. I absolutely love the coding and just the general feel of the mouse in hand, and it is a mouse that I will be continuing to use going forward. I do really like what VGN has been doing because they're like sort of in the clone business, but with the Y2 and the F2 here, it's shapes we've seen, but there's like slight differences in the shapes, or there's like a slightly different size to the shape. But so even though they're not new shapes, they are still something we've never had exactly in hand. And in this mouse market, that's pretty refreshing. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on X at DAZZ, and check out the Mousecast podcast. We've had some pretty great guests on recently, like Logpile, Azar from 10 to X, and Melon. You can also check out my Discord server, and if you're the one person in the YouTube comments who told me you like my reviews, thank you, but didn't like my outros, well, sucks to suck. We'll see you.